they have been okay. So they also feel traumatized since they feel that they are angry because they feel that they have been dragged into this and they get frustrated also. And they will also think that what will happen next. Will their private lives and will be shown to the public, and they will be questioning them that see this is how they are living and stuff. On C, they tell that every what they see towards other people is they feel empathize towards them. They also talk and ask about the misfortunate incident. They again and again ask them that how it happened, why you were there at that time and rest of stuff. And also the society and the media outlets, they are also taking sides. They again and again they showcase their images, which leads to their nervous breakdowns. The gain which you have is that the particular person can be a social activist, they get to know the darker side of the world and ability to deal with it. Like how now if it has happened again, how can we deal with it and stuff. And also knows the ones they also know that who from all the family that we have are the one who are taking sides with us. The pains that they have in is that they have a lifetime consequences and damages for which not one is responsible. Not even they are not even responsible. They also have mental and physical damage for a lifetime since they have been questioned again and again. Also, the society and the world will also associate with the incident forever instead of the person you are. And also, I may also agree that they also have life-threatening impairments. What they say and do in this, what the people say towards them. They tell that it must be the victim's fault. She has gone there. It must be because of her why she was being that. And the media outrage is forgetting the victim's personal space also. They, uh, I, I can get to my own example. It had happened in my area only. The police and the local media, they barged into their homes and in their room to ask what happened and how it happened. So it is not good. And also they makes the victim and internet celebrities and make campaigns with her face on banners, which leads to more people know that it has happened, and which also leads to a negative impact instead of a positive impact on them. And also the media outlets make them TRP puppets and forgetting the emotions and feelings. What they hear is that they feel empathize towards them, like all the relatives make them look more cautious. And also the so-called Indian society calls these survivors persons with strong willpower. And the news channel brings them on the channels and asks questions that are not suitable for their mind and their current state. If a particular person has been gone through this particular trauma right now, and if we ask that particular person again and again this question, so it might not be good for her also and her family members that why is she questioned again and again for a particular reason.
Yeah, that's great. Really incredible. There's so much thought has gone into this. I'm super impressed. It's really great to see everyone contributing so much and kind of going so deep on the many different sides of it. Particularly what you're saying here about kind of while they're talking about the survivor as a person with strong willpower, they might not be ready to kind of do that whole process of going out in public and having all these questions that maybe aren't suitable for their current state of mind. So yeah, it's really great, just the level of detail that you've gone into here. Super impressed. So I mean, with that, so we've got enough time. I might try and jump into my presentation, and then after that we can jump into Kavita's. I think will segue pretty nicely. I'll just double check. Can people see my screen? Hopefully we're looking at a Padlet right now. Is that the idea? Okay, cool. So if I do this, can people see a slideshow now? Are we good?
Yes, we can see it.
Cool. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to chuck on a little timer just so I make sure I don't ramble too much. And I'll jump into what I'm going to talk about today. Again, I've got my slides over here, so I do apologize if I'm kind of half looking at the camera, half looking over here. It's got the two screens going on. Cool. So yeah, my name's Michael Hunter. I'm from QUT. I work with the design lab, but I'm actually a part of the computer science school, and I work in human-computer interaction. So there's a lot of crossover there, but specifically I work with augmented reality and trying to design augmented reality as a tool for kind of better community engagement. So what does that kind of look like? So these are just some pictures that I'm definitely going to go into more detail later, but these are the kind of things that we're working on. Most of it's prototypes at this stage, but we're trying to figure out how do we best talk to people and how do we kind of engage communities and individuals in ways that are more kind of either customized to them or more personal or more playful. And these are some of the things we've come up with. However, for my presentation today, I don't want to go, I guess, too deep on the augmented reality because I know that for this challenge, we're not trying to focus too much on a specific technology. So while I will kind of show you some of the possibilities, I think instead it's more important that I talk about kind of design concepts around technology and what the role of technology is and how we can kind of use it to hopefully come up with some really interesting interventions for this challenge. Cool. So these are kind of the three broad thoughts I have, or I guess like the ways I wanted to structure what I want to talk about today. The first is this idea of platform empathy, and I kind of think of that as the what. So I'll go into that in a bit more detail in the next slide, but it's kind of this, at least I see my role as a facilitator, an enabler of conversation. And through that, hopefully we can generate more empathy. And then the next thing I'm going to talk about is this idea of interfacing at an individual level. So often, like our presentations last week, we look a lot at councils and then we look at community groups. And I want to kind of go one level deeper and say, how do we talk to like every single individual and really try to understand their stories and their experiences? And then lastly, I want to talk about virtual eyes on the street. So kind of again, carrying on from what we talked about last week with this concept of eyes on the street and kind of increasing safer cities that way. I want to talk about what that kind of looks like in the future. But for each of these, I will show some augmented reality prototypes that I've worked on just to kind of give it some context and see what's possible. Cool. So platform empathy. I kind of see this as, or the question I ask is kind of what is my role and how can I help? For me, obviously, being a white male, I really need to both recognize my privilege and kind of through that, the responsibility that I have in this whole conversation. So the way that I kind of have tried to understand that and best support that is not to try and take on a role that I don't, maybe have as much knowledge in or that I haven't experienced, but instead to try and use the place that I have to let other people share their stories and better enable conversation for other people. So I kind of did up this diagram because I know we've been talking about our personas and our stakeholders and empathy maps and all those sorts of things. And so for me, I'm not a survivor, I'm not a perpetrator. Unfortunately, maybe at some point I've been a bystander. I don't think so, but my knowledge in this space is still I'm still trying to learn and improve. And I'm not a member of council. So I think it's important that I try and figure out, okay, well, what other places are there and how can I still support? And one of those is as, I guess, a facilitator. So kind of in the middle, where you're creating this platform for everyone else to be able to share, and then you can learn from all those people, but it's more about creating a safe space for conversation. And I think when we think about technology, that's a really important kind of shift that we would think about. So technology doesn't necessarily have to be this thing that solves all problems. And if we just try and use it to solve a specific problem, sometimes we can just end up creating other problems because these are quite complex. But when we think about creating platforms, then we stop necessarily trying to solve an immediate problem. And instead we allow everyone else to share their experiences and kind of generate empathy with each other so that we can have these really rich conversations. And through that, come to more kind of, I guess, collective solutions. So I guess the key kind of questions that I always try and ask, or that I think we should be asking, is this: how can you start these conversations, and how can you ensure you're going to have safe spaces? And a lot of the design of the technology, that's how you actually ensure a safe space. And I've put a couple of examples here. So our Discord, the Safe City Design Challenge, is a good example of a platform. So we're not necessarily recognizing Discord as this kind of active role, but it is actually playing a very important role in encouraging the rest of us to talk to each other and get to know each other and continue to support these conversations. Similarly, for an augmented reality experience I did early in the year, we set up a Padlet like the one we've done for this design challenge, where people who are interacting with our experience could kind of post really anything they wanted to this public platform, as long as it was to do with the city kind of stuff that we were talking about. And then they could see each other's and like each other's. And it was kind of, I wasn't trying to be active in that space. I was just trying to support other people to share their thoughts. Okay, so this one's gone white for some reason. And now it's green. Okay, so I'll just do it this way. So the second point is interfacing with individuals. So we're trying to create these platforms and use technology to enable people to share. But everyone shares differently. And we really need to, if we're trying to first have empathy and kind of generate empathy, we really need to create space for everybody in how they want to share and how they want to have these conversations, which really means to facilitate conversation, we need to talk to individuals, and we need to, I guess, listen. That's kind of the key point. So we're not necessarily say, hey, can you engage with us in these specific ways? Instead, it's more about how can we create spaces where we listen to them and we learn how they already engage, and we can kind of align with that. And it's this idea of scaling from cities and councils down past community groups, even really to the individuals, and understanding how they like to share. A lot of the time, individuals' stories and experiences can sometimes get lost at more collective and group levels. So technology really allows us to drill down to those individuals and learn what they have to say. And in terms of augmented reality, these are some of the experiences that we built earlier in the year. So we were trying to test those exact questions and understand how people do engage. And so on the left, we built an augmented reality quiz, basically. And if people place their phone camera looking at the table, then in physical space, then in virtual space, this kind of gallery would show up where they could look at different pictures of Brisbane and try and figure out which ones are at which scale and which ones they like and they don't like. And then probably the more successful one actually is on the right, which was basically a city builder. So we would let people, they look through their phone, and on the physical table in front of them, they'd see a digital plot of land. And on that plot of land, they could actually go through a series of choices and build their own little city. We would ask them, do they prefer public transport? Do they like high rises or housing, stadiums, and just basically lots of little choices. And at the end of it, they had their own unique city, but they've also actually kind of filled out a survey without realizing. So it's more of a playful, fun way for them to engage that I guess could make them feel more comfortable. Obviously, there's so many different ways that you can interface with individuals, but these are just examples of augmented reality. And then also how, if you think outside the box a bit, it doesn't always have to be just traditional forms of engagement. It's more about letting people create. And then maybe if they create, they'll actually share with you in other ways. Cool. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was eyes on the street. And in my case, especially augmented reality's case, virtual eyes on the street. So just to kind of, I guess, gloss over it, environmental design can create safer spaces, which is what we touched on last week, or Marcus touched on last week when he briefly was talking about eyes on the street. And eyes on the street is this idea that the more people you have, or the more active or lively the space is, in some ways, the safer it is, because there's more people around to intervene if things are happening and stuff like that. And it's been proven true in a lot of ways, but I guess the difficulty with it at the moment is you can't really just redesign or recreate an entire street overnight. There's people who work on that street, live on that street. There's buses and public transport on that street. There's just so much that goes into making a street that you can't redesign entire physical environments particularly quickly. So in that case, something like augmented reality can actually be super useful because it allows you to have kind of virtual eyes on the street. So on my screen now, this is white, and I don't know why. Let's see. Well, anyway, basically, virtual.
White as well.
Sorry?
It's appearing white. I don't know why.
Yeah, me neither. It's yeah, I have no idea why it's deciding to break. But at least we have the pictures. It's probably the most important part. So what I can talk to is, yeah, the idea that whilst you can't always have people on the street physically and you can't redesign the streets in that way overnight, using augmented reality or virtual environments, you can actually spatially locate virtual things so that they kind of active in a digital sense, even if they're not in a physical sense. And this is a lot of what the metaverse and things like that are talking towards. So an example that we created was this portal. And it was a digital portal that you can walk through and be inside a virtual city, but it was physically located on our university campus. So the only way you could go through the portal was to actually walk there. And that created more activity in that space, but it also meant that there was this whole other digital world there that people could interact with from their house. And through that, we're kind of creating these two worlds and placing one on top of the other. And in a way, kind of getting virtual eyes on the street. And as you can see in the pictures, there's a portal on the left that you walk into. And then when you're in that portal, you can look back through it and see back out into the real world. So we're kind of bridging that gap between what is physical and what is virtual. And through that, kind of, we can design for these safer city concepts in a more agile way, rather than taking all the resources and time that these things can take years or longer. So these are lots of other ways that maybe we can intervene. Let's see if I can, maybe I can change the background on the fly here.
What if you refresh the browser?
Here we go. Hey, okay, cool. So I guess my three closing points, which I probably could have made even if the background was white, but I think it's important that everyone can read it as well. So while I'm talking about augmented reality, I really wanted to kind of bring it back to what does that mean for technology more broadly? So then for your own interventions or whatever you're thinking, it doesn't have to be augmented reality, but you can still learn something from how to think about these interventions. And the first is that technology isn't always a problem solver specifically. It really is more about starting conversations, so creating platforms. Obviously, in the case of gender-based violence and these sorts of issues, we really, really want to try and solve these problems and address these challenges. And sometimes the best way to do that, or one way to do that, is to create a platform where people can share their experiences, and like Safe City has done. So in that case, it can be really helpful to think about how can our interventions support other conversation rather than be the only way to, fix a specific problem. And then secondly, this idea of interfacing with individuals. If we're going to create a platform and people are going to interact on this platform, technology can kind of allow us to go down to individual levels. Again, like what Safe City already offers. So how do you interact with those individuals? And I think it's important that we first listen to them and understand how they want to interface with us, rather than going at it from a top-down perspective. And then lastly, this idea of virtual eyes on the street. So we can create safer environments, and we have a lot of different ways to do that in a physical sense. But what augmented reality and a lot of technologies are allowing us to do is to blend the physical and virtual, so that we can kind of perhaps take some of those things we know from physical environments, but do them in virtual ways a lot quicker. And through that, we can kind of create these methods of prevention that are a bit more organic. So rather than necessarily saying, let's put more police on that street and they can react when something happens, instead we can design these environments that almost prevent the things from happening in the first place. And that's pretty much me. Sorry, Kavita, I think maybe I went a little bit over time there. But did anyone have any questions, or that all makes sense?
You can drop your questions into chat.
Yes, yeah. If you have any questions,
completely fine to like drop it into chat.
100%. And we'll also, after this, be doing a range of other exercises. So throughout, we can talk about any of it further. But yeah, I'll stop sharing. I'll pass over to Kavita.
Yeah, actually, I have a question. Can I ask?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So, like when you was introducing virtual eyes in the street, one point that I had in my mind was like, where do we draw a line between surveillance and security?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And it's always a bit of a challenge. I think surveillance is normally thought of as kind of top down. So if the council were setting up cameras in the streets, and instead security is more like this eyes on the street idea, where it's actually a sense of safety or a sense of security created by all the community and the people who exist in that place. And so in the same way, in a digital space, in Discord, if we had the head of Discord monitoring all our channels and breathing down our necks, we would feel like that's surveillance. But instead, if we can create a platform where everyone feels that they're engaged with each other, then that will create a safer space. So in terms of virtual eyes on the street, it's kind of that similar idea where it's more about can we create platforms that kind of allow community to develop, and through that, then there will be less of a feeling of surveillance, but still a feeling of security and safety.
Yes, thank you.
No worries. Cool. I might pass over. You want to jump in?
Oh yeah, sure. I'm ready.
Should I stop sharing and you share?
That would be great. Okay. I'm just gonna. What am I doing? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm doing the thing where I have two screens as well. So just gonna share my screen now. I'll wait. Oh, okay. Problem with too many windows open on my computer. All right. So it's really great to catch up with all of you guys again. And following on from Michael, I think mine is a little different and a little loaded with theory, but like bear with me. I think it's always good to know, what work other people have done that are providing us with like foundation for our work now. But to begin, I guess, I would like to begin by acknowledging the Turrbal and Yagara people, the traditional custodians of the land on which this presentation takes place. I pay my respect to all elders, past, present, and emerging, and I acknowledge all creatures, human and non-human, who inhabit the lands and waters where we live. I would like to begin by thanking the Safe City team for organizing the session and all of you for attending. My name is Kavita Gonsalves. I am a brown woman with curly hair up to my shoulders. I use she, her pronoun. So I want to take you back to 16 December 2012. A young girl who was with her partner was brutally assaulted. And within 11 days, she died of her injuries. In the many days post this assault in the cities of India, villages of India, the women took the streets. In this assault, there was a spectrum. Every young girl, every woman, every trans woman, every one of them who walked the streets fearing for their lives. They were out there on the streets. Nirbhaya represented a spectrum to all of us. We saw us in her. But the state met these protests with equal force. The state wasted no time in telling all of these women where their place are. the trauma that these bodies carry had to go back to where they came from. The state and now public spaces continue to vacate women of their rights and their place and their right to be in place. So how do we make society listen to our needs when we are not there? But most importantly, what if we, the women, the unseen and unheard, can take those places back? What if our trauma, our experiences, which are hidden in our bodies, had a right to be in public spaces? So to build on that, what if our unheard stories could be told on our own terms? To do so, I offer another kind of placemaking, which is radical placemaking, and in this case, radical media architecture. In radical placemaking, those who experience exclusions, like women in India sometimes do, they engage in placemaking on a social justice issue with the support of digital tools. The term radical comes from Freire's radical critical pedagogy, Margaret Ledwith's views on community development, and it's a radical departure from conventional placemaking processes. Placemaking is normally defined as the act of building physical space or community spaces. They can be top-down processes or bottom-up processes as well. Examples of top-down processes are, for example, the placement of a statue in public space, and bottom-up practices tend to be things like festivals, or you have something like the Park Day, or even like many of the tactics that were shared with you last week. So as a placemaking tactic, radical placemaking, the focus is not to make any kind of tangible, not necessarily to make tangible interventions, but instead we are interested in the intangible. So usually the term placemaking means that institutions or communities engage in uplifting physical spaces through physical interventions in order to attract communities or create places of meaning. However, in my work, placemaking is ephemeral and ethereal, brief and momentary, visual and experiential. It embeds people's knowledge, memories, cultures, and identity into place through technologies afforded by the mobile phone. It is intangible because there is no physical intervention to public space. Rather, there is the creation of an experience. This experience is created by the marginalized so that members of the dominant group or mainstream public can undergo an embodiment of othering. An embodiment means to be able to experience what something else has been put in front of you, like you are able to experience what I feel, for example. So just a bit of theory for you. So a lot of my work comes from post-colonial theory, and I look into this process of othering. And first, there are three steps sort of in othering, and one is that there is a powerful and there is a subordinate other. If you were to think of a man as being powerful and a subordinate other being a woman in the patriarchy, for example. Second, the other is considered and conditioned as inferior to the powerful. And third, that knowledge and technology rightfully belongs to the powerful. So in this study, I look at how technology that is built and designed for the powerful and how it can be subverted to serve the other. The theory in my work tends to cover communities that experience marginalization and oppression, and how place is the carrier of histories, identity, and memories. How our identities subject us to an intersection of oppressions and exclusions, and the promise of technologies of connecting place with the stories of others. So this is sort of the driving question in my work, which will also become really pertinent in the design exercise that we do next. I mean, working with a question, so to speak. So I look at how immersive technologies can redefine the way marginalized people engage in placemaking. So usually whenever I'm testing out a technology with a community, I first learn to use that technology myself. And I try to, and the next step is, learn it enough to be able to teach it to others. And in this case, I was looking at using locative technology, which is something that you see in Google Maps, for example, where you type in a location and it points out where the location is and you go there. But over here, I wanted to use the similar basis of that technology to actually build stories around place. And it's so each of these places, instead of telling me that there's a business over there, would actually tell me a story, maybe a story about the business, but using the same sort of creating an experience around that place. So one of the tools that I've used is what you see over here is called Twine. And you can see the graphical interface over here, which is the background image. So Twine is a free interactive fiction tool that's available online and is particularly known in the gaming community for its empathy games, where players experience the game author's personal stories. So Twine tends to be text-based, and you can also embed digital media such as photos, images, videos, etc. But a lot of the people who design Twine games actually tend to make it just text-based. And they're very similar to Choose Your Adventure. They're called Choose Your Adventure storybooks. So my process when I was testing out Twine, my process involved creating a narrative around places and embedding all this media like images, etc., in the locations to actually create a low-tech version of augmented reality. So usually augmented reality is associated with visual elements, such as if you think of the game Pokemon Go, that something pops up on your mobile screen. Or even the examples that Michael shared earlier. Usually augmented reality is associated with that, but augmented reality is not just that. It also means that you augment a location with other kinds of media, just any other kinds of media. And so in that way, this was a low-tech version of augmented reality. And the constraint in this particular work is that you have to be in a specific location to experience a narrative or a story. For example, you have to be at India Gate to experience what the protests were like during that time, if someone made a story about that. So that was my first prototype that you see on the left, which is called In the Mood for Love. And I based this on a movie that I'm quite fond of, which is Wong Kar-wai's movie. And it basically uses, and this prototype actually, I use the story of having a crush on a boy, which is a very, having a crush on someone is a very common experience. And I use that actually as a decoy to discuss personal stories of gender-based violence. And this prototype exists and you can experience it all over here in City Botanic Gardens, which is just next door. And all you need is your mobile phone, headphones, and sunnies. And this gave way to actually, the prototype helped in sort of leading to my next two projects, which are the Chatty Bench project and the Transhuman Saunter. So in Chatty Bench project, which is a case of radical placemaking, it actually tackles the social issue of social isolation. All of us are quite familiar now with this term social isolation. We've sort of experienced it during the pandemic. But in Kelvin Grove, this area where this project was held, this experience came up much earlier to that, and I'll talk about it in a bit. So this project is a collaboration between QUT Design Lab, community organizations Communify and Village Church, and Kelvin Grove Urban Village out here in Brisbane. So Kelvin Grove Urban Village is a mixed-use development here in the city of Brisbane, and it includes residential, commercial, educational, and recreational uses. As this is a new community, this is a new community that was formed around 2000 to 2010. It was being built. There were a number of placemaking and community development projects undertaken here. In its current state, Kelvin Grove Urban Village is a diverse community with people coming from all over the world. Plus, it has affordable housing with people coming from all walks of life. It has a big transient population of students because of the university that's located over there. And there is a constant influx and outflow of people. It becomes difficult for people who come here for a short time to build connections with people and develop social capital. And social capital is quite important social capital is essentially the networks of people that you know and what that will lead you to. Will it lead you to your next job? Will you know where to access services from? So during my time over here, social isolation was identified as a major social issue in Kelvin Grove. So as a first step to building connection, Kate of Communify put a sign of happy to chat on a bench outside Communify premises in Kelvin Grove. And it was an attempt to actually encourage people to speak to each other while they tapped into the Wi-Fi of Communify. This became the inspiration of the Chatty Bench project. The project was imagined as a series of face-to-face workshops where people would develop geolocative stories or narratives with the bench being the nodal point. But what happened was that COVID happened and this project went completely online, and we used platforms such as Google Classroom, Slack, Zoom. We even used a virtual environment of Mozilla Hubs to deliver this project. So over 10 weeks, 16 storytellers from different parts of the world who live here in Kelvin Grove, such as India, Mongolia, Iran, Vietnam, were part of this project. They were all over the age of 18, and it's, as you can see, predominantly women. Most of them are new migrants to Australia, just like myself. And they created stories on the impact of the pandemic, their love for dancing, precarious migration journeys, and even about like experiences of domestic violence, for example. And they laid out their stories over the landscape of Kelvin Grove. So like I mentioned Pokemon Go before, this is like Pokemon Go, but instead of catching Pokemons, you catch a song, a poem, a narrative designed and created by the storytellers. So the situated stories were made by the 16 storytellers through a combination of different digital technologies. As I mentioned earlier, Twine was used, digital storytelling skills were delivered, and they created locative media, such as images that you can experience only in a particular place. And it was made for the smallest, most accessible and pervasive unit of media contraptions, that is the smartphone, because everyone here carries a smartphone. They might not have a computer, but they do have a smartphone. And the project had 2 exhibitions. The first one was held in the virtual environments of Mozilla Hubs. And over here, you can see the virtual environment, and it's completely modeled on the neighborhood of Kelvin Grove. The other exhibition closed out the Chatty Bench project and was held during the farmers market in Kelvin Grove. What is special about the face-to-face exhibition is that all storytellers of the project met for the first time. The stories were also experienced by exhibition attendees on their smartphones, armed with headphones, a hat, sunnies, and sport shoes, because it gets really hot here. The storytellers in conversation felt empowered, their words, not mine, thanks to learning coding. They felt heard and listened to, and were able to make sense of their difficult situations, particularly during the pandemic. The ones who experienced the stories said that they had an embodied experience and felt connected to the storytellers. Places of Kelvin Grove had enhanced meanings to both groups. So something that I'm always looking at is feminist theory. And I also look at something called feminist HCI methodology, which is essentially a human-computer interaction. And I look at it simplistically at the processes that led to the design of, the prototype and the Chatty Bench project. So the initial game narrative that I built, the prototype, was actually built from my personal experience. And in the subsequent Chatty Bench project, it was all built on the experiences of the 16 storytellers in Kelvin Grove Urban Village. So the storytellers created meaningful and emotionally challenging digital game narratives in order to affect players' attitudes on multiple social justice issues. Like Michael was saying, how do we make people listen? This is probably one way we can get people to listen, because they're listening to someone's story, which has been done creatively. The player of the artifact is provided with transparency on the nature of the game content to help guide their choice of adventure. The player always knows, what the content is. If there is any disturbing content, they are warned beforehand that, look, there is this kind of content. Maybe if you are not feeling comfortable, do not, you have the choice to not do it. So the limitations could be that the creators of the game, the researcher and the players had to function within the framework of one language, that is English, and the limitations of language within the system of Twine itself. Further, those who do speak English fluently, who do not speak English fluently, have the challenge of learning 2 languages, one of English and that of the code itself. Another limitation is if you don't have the technology on your body, you cannot participate. Nevertheless, the task in this project was to remember where we come from so that we know where we are going. And the project has now moved towards a festival, which is kind of ongoing right now. So when I developed this game, I developed a whole, sort of curriculum about how people can actually build these Twine games. And now I've actually simplified it and make it much more simpler. And if any of you all are really interested to learn, there's a step-by-step process over here of how you can build a Twine game, a geolocative Twine game with your experiences itself. And I will drop this link into chat. But yeah, that brings me to the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions about this. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. So in
Yeah,
placemaking,
sure.
for example, aren't we getting into the risk that one culture will, for example, like in a country like India, like a Bengali storyteller will enforce his culture to a Tamil uh, audience
Mm-hmm.
in such a
Yes.
structure?
Well, that really depends on who is in power and then what kind of systems people use politically to talk to each other. If it is an autocratic system, then yeah, definitely it's the Bengali imposes it. But if it's a conversation between cultures, between people, stakeholders of the place, then you can come to a consensus over maybe this place is okay for for this particular thing that the Bengali community wants to do. And then, everybody comes to a consensus that this place on the right over here is probably, good for what the other community wants to do as well. So it's actually about making dialogue. It's not about just deciding for one another, because there are a lot of other stakeholders. There are a lot of other stakeholders who live there, who live their daily life, and they deserve to have the conversation with one another. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it. I'd be curious to think, what do you think about it? Yeah.
Yeah. So like my idea was like, so the different cultural symbols which way they interact similar ideas, so different symbols but similar ideas, so that conflict was bridging, but yes, I got my answer.
Okay, yeah. And I think Elsa also makes a point that, we have more in common than differences. And I completely agree with that. But I think sometimes, I think in like what I try to remember is that I have to acknowledge that also there are differences, and in not acknowledging them and ignoring them, I think it also causes problems. Because I think, like, for example, there are so many examples about that, but yeah, I don't need to get into that. But yeah. Yeah, also, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just putting in, like when we are talking about empathy, what is empathy? And it's really walking in somebody's shoes. But if you don't understand their context, you don't feel them, you don't hear them, you don't, listen deeply, then you won't really have empathy, right? And even in today's world, whether it's the climate topic or the farmers protest or whatever, everybody has an opinion, but can we find the common ground? Can we start a dialogue? But in order to do that, you have to be able to listen to the other side. And I like what Michael said earlier. Technology is only a facilitator, it's not the solution. It can help in this empathy process.
Yeah, I mean, am I muted? No. Yeah, I completely agree. I think it is a facilitator, and we must never, I think it's dangerous to think of technology as a solution to everything. It's not, because at the end of it, it is actually people making the code, making the technology. They bring in their biases into it, and causes technology itself causes a lot of problems. And yeah, like, for example, AI, which scares everybody, but like, yeah, there are definitely a lot of problems with AI. And one of the common arguments, for example, for AI is that it's going to do away a lot of stupid work, which is probably true, but we also need to recognize the danger with some of these technologies. For example, AI cannot recognize cannot recognize curly hair from straight hair, or puts up curly hair as being unprofessional, for example, because that's the person who coded that, or the number of searches that determine that is what is giving that answer. Whereas curly hair is just curly hair and straight hair is just straight hair. But there are like biases attached to that. So yeah, I think that's something to think about. Yeah.
And in the very first session, we did biases and the socio-cultural norms that advance and perpetuate those biases. So you might want to revisit that again. But I want to remind you to keep these in mind, because now we'll be co-creating from today onwards. And so try to be empathetic. At Safe City, we don't really name, shame, or blame. We use the stories and the data that's generated to really think about, okay, how do we then play a part in making that change happen? And that's why I think we've been able to successfully work with different groups of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just wondering if there's any other questions. Yeah, okay. So I think we can go on to our design sprint, which I think is quite useful and really builds on the work of, the empathy map that you all have been working on, personas, which is really quite useful because it just basically means that you have done some amount of research, even if it's a little. It's quite important to have that. So Michael, I just want to check, would you like to share screen, or would you like me to share?
Sure.
Yeah.
I can share, yeah. And then I guess, yeah, are we going to drop this in the chat, or is it already in the Discord?
Yes, I've made it shareable. Hold on, let me just check the settings. Yeah, okay, awesome. Yeah.
Cool. Cool. Well, did you maybe want to kick off just talking through these couple of like the double diamond model and stuff like that? And then I'm happy to jump in and talk about the structure of this particular workshop.
Perfect. Okay, so usually whenever the thing with design is it can be a really unstructured process because you are trying to do something creative, and usually with some creativity there isn't a process to the madness, right? But a lot of times what really helps is starting off with a process. It might not be something you continue to use throughout, but we start off with the process. So one of the things is this double diamond model where, so we're going to share two kinds of processes that companies use, or design firms use. And this is the double diamond model by Design Council UK. And usually a design stage would start with first doing enough research about the problem and looking for inspiration and understanding your user needs. And then you slowly begin to define the problems or the objectives for your project, what it is you exactly want to do after you've done this amount of research, right? And then you start defining the project itself. And then based on the problem that you've actually identified, you start actually developing. And the developing is where you, again, you diverge. You diverge to look at a lot of ideas, have a lot of concepts, and typically you're showing a client all of these things. So you give them a couple of options to choose from, because that's just because you want to give some amount of choice, and maybe, also think about, also be able to listen to what your client has to say about the kind of concepts that you're developing. And then based on what the client is really happy with, you begin to narrow down on your solution, and then, really detail out the nitty-gritty and deliver the design solution or intervention and get it made, whether it's a building or whether it's an app. So this is one kind of process. The next one is a Google Sprint model. And the Google Sprint model is basically the Google Sprint model basically comes from the need to actually reduce the number of days that can get wasted in doing really just creating something and then putting it out to the market and then realizing that it has failed. So what Google Sprint tends to do is that they first, they do it under 6 days. And the first day is they map the problem, and they ask the experts and they look at their target audience. The second day, they actually sketch out ideas for the problem. The third one, they actually begin to they decide on what kind of solution or intervention that they want to go with. The fourth day is that they build a prototype. They never ever build the actual thing. They build a prototype, and on the fifth day, they actually test it out. So they test it out with users. So under a week, they've gone from identifying a problem to actually coming out with a sort of okay solution to test out. And if they see value in it, they can then begin to spend more time and money on it and push the resources towards it. So this is another model. So this is where I hand over to Michael. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically today we're going to run through our own take on these sorts of models that fits better towards this challenge. But we're going to undertake a design sprint. And the idea here is that we're going to go through all these steps, probably with different timeframes now, just to make up at the same time that we have left. But it follows a similar idea. So we've kind of got this problem identification and defining stages. And we're kind of doing the double diamond model thing where we start with quite broad scope and then we kind of define it. And then from there we ideate, so we go big again. I guess funnily enough, this is like a triple diamond where we kind of are repeating that process 3 times. But these are each of the steps. And so the way that we're going to do this is we're going to have a step, and we're hoping every group can actually open this presentation up themselves because we've got it kind of structured. I'll jump out of the full screen and I'll show you. So for example, we're going to step through problem identification, then define, then ideation, and go through all these steps. So we've got the first step, problem identification. Once we jump into this activity, each group will have their own, or each team, will have their own slide where they can fill in their own notes and complete the activity. So we will need at least one person from each team in here so that you can make sure you're keeping up with our activities. We're not going to go too deep because these are quite quick. That's the whole point of the sprint, is it's very agile and it's over very quickly, and we're going all the way from identifying a problem to potentially delivering something. So we're not going to go too deep, but yeah, we're hoping that one team member from each group can jump in here. And maybe, Rita, do we give it maybe at 4:30 we kick off, give everyone 5 minutes to jump in, and then we'll just kind of
I just want to check in if everyone is in. Do we have one member per team in?
If you are in here, then maybe jump in the team slide that is relevant to you. And so if we see at least one person from slide 6 to 13, then we'll know that everybody's here.
That's smart.
Webavi, is everyone there? At least one person from every team?
Hi, yes, we have 8 teams. We have at least one person in every team. I think just Bravehearts is a team that doesn't have any member at the moment. So we have 7 teams with at least one member in it.
Okay,
awesome.
That's great. And can all teams see their slide with their team names? Are they able to see it for the first activity?
Yes.
Awesome. Can we get a thumbs up? Oh, I can't see thumbs up. Maybe raise your hand if everyone's able to access their slide, so we'll know that everyone got it. All right, so 3 raised hands. I have 3 raised hands.
We've got one in Team
4.
Murphy. We've got a couple in Team Squadron.
We need a 7.
Someone in
yes.
Team Wings,
okay.
So.
I think we got 7. Yes, we got 7 people in. Awesome. Well done.
Ooh.
Well done. This is a good use of reactions. Okay, great. Okay. Yeah. So, Michael, would you like to do the first one?
Sure. Okay.
Just take them through problem identification. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And let's say I'm just trying to do some quick maths in my head to figure out exactly how long we should do every activity for. Maybe let's call it 10 minutes. We've got 6 activities and we've got an hour basically. So let's go 10 minutes per activity, I think. And we'll just see how we're going for time. So quick and dirty. This is the first part of the sprint, problem identification. So basically in the next 10 minutes from now until 4:40, we're encouraging everyone to, with your team, think about that kind of first question that we went over. So how might we engage people who are otherwise disengaged to make cities safer and reduce street harassment? And we're kind of trying to help you through this by giving you a couple of sub-questions. So in your team, which we'll set up some breakout rooms as well, or you can in the Discord,
No, we have breakout rooms set up.
We have breakout rooms? Okay, cool.
Yeah, Weberv has helped us with that.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. So yeah, I guess the questions are, what bothers you about this problem? And then that's probably going to be where it's still quite broad, because how might we engage people who are otherwise disengaged is still quite a broad question. So once you figured out that broad problem, then we want to talk about what are the mini problems within that. So you can kind of start to break it down and slice it a bit. And then you've got, what have you learned from this research? And what do you think needs to change to really start to address this problem? So they're the first 4 questions. And as you can see here, we've got some slides to kind of go deeper on each of those as well. But yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. I don't want to take up too much time because we want to go through this quickly.
Yeah. So
maybe-
on the left is your question, and on the right you can actually drop your answers, like in that table.
Type anything.
Yeah. So you can type. So does everyone understand?
We'll also come around from to each of the breakout rooms and kind of help you through each exercise as well. So.
Yes, that would be great. Someone's raising a hand, I swear to you. Yeah. Or is that an error of some sort? Okay. All right, looks like everyone understands. So I think we're good to start the breakout rooms.
Cool.
Done.
Excited.
Like we need to talk about, talk about what's happening tomorrow.
Yeah, so what I want to say is, if you can go back, look at your the first 4 exercises we did today, refine it, fine tune it, because tomorrow you can then pick that one idea, because Supreet will take you through storytelling and how to use the video, best practices in making a reel. But for that, you need to have your idea. So then you can start working on the 5th problem, which is what Michael just said, the who, the what, the how, etc. And then over the weekend, you will have to film those 4 30-second films, and by Monday evening, you have to submit it. Yeah, so it's going to go really quickly. So do you have any questions at the moment? I'm going to ask Kajal. There was a lot of discussion in your group.
So no question as such. So we had a number of pointers, like how we want to take up our ideas. So when we had 100 of ideas coming up, we just ended up at 30th. So we clubbed in various ideas for our top 3 ideas. Now the main target is to focus on that one particular idea which we want to take up and how we are going to work around that.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. So it seems like y'all are pretty much on track. Kanishka?
Yeah, ma'am, I just had this question about filming. So we have to film it outside, or we can just, collect clips and make it as a running documentary kind of pictorial informative thing. Or we have to film it by ourselves, going outside on board and then like filming it actually.
You can do whatever you want. You just have to create something for 30 seconds, four different things of 30 seconds minimum. Yeah, maximum is 1 minute,
Okay.
But we wanted 30 seconds because you know how reels are. 30 seconds is more than enough to share your message. So, but we want 4 different 30-second reels. And maximum is 1 minute each, but we are looking at ideal 30 seconds. Kushagra, you had a question.
No, ma'am.
Okay, so you can use any kind of creativity to create these reels, you know. But your message should come loud and clear, and that's the big thing. So we are looking at, and we've already circulated the jury guidelines, right? Your message, who are you targeting it to, is your creativity and innovation also, because everybody is creating reels, but how did you create those reels? That is most important. And of course, your messaging. Any other questions? And don't get stressed out. It's going to be fun. You saw how fun the poem was, you know. I'm just saying somebody can read out a poem also. Okay, anybody else? I'm going to ask Saloni Gupta. Saloni, how are you doing? Is it fine?
Yes, ma'am. We had fun like in these 10 minutes. We discussed a lot.
Can you imagine in 10 minutes you can come up with 30 ideas? Kajal said 30 ideas.
Yeah, we did come up with 30 ideas. Like we typed everything we came. We even came with like some specific ideas. Now tomorrow we'll work on one specific idea together.
So like Kavita and Michael said, just bump in your ideas.
Yeah,
So we were doing the same.
typing everything we came.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Swapnil, how are you doing?
Hello, ma'am. Yes. It was a really, really good exercise. Because there's a huge brainstorming going on. So I wanted to know all the 4 reels that we are working towards it, that are all interconnected. Like the first reel shows like how it, what is exactly the problem, and then second reel how it is occurring in current status, and then third is about the how we can solve this, and fourth is it a really what's current situation in the society. So
I think
all
that's
4
really
reels
smart. I think that's really, really smart the way you're thinking about it. That's one way of doing it, or you could have like 4 different ways to demonstrate your idea, because at the end of the day, that's kind of the more important part. Like going from saying that you started with this problem and then you've come up with this idea, and how does this idea tackle that problem? That's kind of what we want to see. So that's, yeah, you can do either or any other way as well. Yeah.
I believe Elsa mentioned in on the very first day how we can deep dive on one topic for like one particular reel, and like also Swapnil mentioned how we can reconnect all the reels. So I think having one topic for each reel and then connecting them with each other could be a good idea for a team.
Think of the Amul ads. They say very few things, but they're so powerful, right? But there are also other ads which build on each other. So we don't have any rules. You surprise us. We are willing to be surprised and pleasantly shocked as well. Okay, so Nikita Chopra, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So you're fine with your group?
Yes.
Okay.
I just wanted, sorry.
Go ahead, Kavita.
Oh, I just wanted to ask how people found the session, like Swapnil, Tanisha, Varun. Just wanted to ask how you found the session, Bhavya.
I personally really, really enjoyed it, and actually it was really informative, and also it kind of made me think about these problems in a way that I haven't before. Like superficially we all think about them, but because of the detailed rubric of how we're supposed to think and what we're supposed to think about, it really, really made me like more informed.
Oh, that's really good to know. Thanks for that. Good to know that what we came up with worked a bit.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Kanishka. Yeah, Kanishka's raising her hand.
Yeah, so I wanted to just give my feedback and viewpoint on the session. I guess it was very interactive as well as interesting because we had a time limit to what we are thinking, and when you have that time barrier, it actually you have that pressure that yeah, we have to come up with this many things in this particular time. So I guess the time management which I was which was the problem for me, I guess here it helped me out because I really came up with all this stuff within the time, and I was really pushing myself to the limit that I have to complete this task on time, and it was highly interactive. Like the way we were answering the questions, I had one of the other members as well as with me, and it was great, really a great session to be in. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
How about Varun? Any feedback?
Yeah, actually,
Kushagra?
this is Varun here. I
Mhm.
found this event very much interesting. At first, I was thinking that it might be yet another session where we have to just give our inputs. But after time, as time goes on, I found out that we are also giving inputs, and our mentors like you and Michael are also giving their inputs, like how we can come up with things. So I found this a very interesting projects in which I can work.
Thanks a lot, Varun, for that. What
Yeah,
about,
thank you.
yeah, Karthik?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I found the session very interesting because there are a lot of sessions out there which actually do the same, but the only difference is over there they like give you this assignment and they
Mhm.
don't tell you anything about how to guide you. They don't guide us or how to go about it. But over here there was a lot of guidance from you, from Michael, and from the whole team as well. So it was really interesting and informative as well, and also helped us learn about how we can go about ideating our ideas.
Yeah, great. Would anyone else like to add anything? Such great feedback. Thank you so much. That really helps us and gives us also a way to improve what we're doing, going forward. Yeah. Kasturi, how about you?
It was so fun that how fast we can think that was so interesting and fun. I think the ideology third slide we did not hundreds of ideas. I think that
Yeah.
was so fun. How
Oh,
quick how quick
we promised fun with that one, so I'm glad to hear that.
okay.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. No, the feedback really, I think learning is a two-way, not I think, learning is a two-way street. So, and there's exchange out here. So we did this in a way to streamline design thinking over here. And we would, definitely like to learn how to improve ourselves. How about Nikhila? Would love to hear your thoughts as well.
Nikhila is actually having audio issues.
Oh, right. Okay. All right. No worries. I guess that's it from me, unless anyone else wants to add anything, but I would hand over back to Elsa. Yeah.
Thanks, Kavita. Thanks, Michael, for a very interesting session. Let's give them a round of applause, digital, virtual, whatever, or unmute yourselves and clap for them. And we see you tomorrow. It's going to be another fun session tomorrow, and we will complete that last bit of this exercise slides tomorrow. So take a look at what you've done. You still have an opportunity to fine tune it and think about what is the one idea that you want to focus on tomorrow, because it really helps if you come prepared with that one idea. Okay. Take care. Have a wonderful
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.